I think it's important to start off this discussion by saying that, firstly, there is no such thing as a pure pastoral society. That's a myth. And yeah, so Somalia was never a pure pastoral society. If we want to go into modes of production, you can describe it as agro-pastoral and a commercial mode of production mixed. So yeah, the concept of a pure pastoral society is a myth because nomads have always traded with the outside world, and they also farmed to supplement their diet and income. So, however, pastoralism was an important aspect of the social relations of production, right? And the majority of them, nomads that is, herded for food animals, so camels, sheep, goats, and cattle. And then there were also donkeys and horses, which they kept too. And also, the second thing to mention is that nomads also didn't just, I think there's a myth around nomads just kind of wandering around, right, from one grazing ground to another, kind of aimlessly wandering, right? But they actually had a very effective rotating system for pasturing their stock. And so during the rainy seasons, they stayed away from the interior plateau and then towards the plateau during the dry seasons. So they were very scientific about this. And this was a very organized system. You stay away from the interior plateau and the permanent wells in the rainy seasons, and then towards the wells and plateau in the dry season. So this system actually is what protected the environment from overgrazing and preserved the soil from erosion. So they knew how to protect their environment through the system, and with the addition of also forbidding the cutting of trees. So there's an old Somali proverb, and it goes like, "Wiq sakaro warara damal yowe sokoya midnamaharo." So the cry of the dik-dik, which is an antelope, and the crashing sound of the demel tree, and the moan of the blood relative always haunts you. So the cutting of a large tree was equivalent in the mind of a Somali nomad. It was equivalent to killing your blood relative, and so, or the small and beautiful fragile antelope, the dik-dik, right, which Somali nomads really admired the dik-dik. And even in a lot of Somali poetry, you'll find that the gub tree is often referred to as lamagara'an, which means that which is not cut down or hit with an axe. So I mention all of this to say that all these things helped maintain the balance of the ecology. So the organized system of pasturing, the taboo of cutting down big trees, protecting the environment is embedded in important Somali folklore. And I know that, indigenous peoples and other Africans had similar methods and systems they used to protect the environment of their regions. And, we know from reading the accounts of, for example, British administrators in the early stages of colonialism, how they would come to our lands and found the environment to be so rich and well balanced. And they were in awe of how well taken care of it was. And they had admitted that, pastoralists were living in an environment that was so balanced and favorable that it allowed pastoralists to maintain large herds of stock without damaging the ecology. And so, I think that's an important thing to know. And so, nomads clearly knew how to live in balance with the land. They had up to some nomads had up to 1,500 she camels even. And so they knew how to live in balance with the land, but colonizers, they're not interested in living in balance with the land. They want to dominate the land and the people. And that's essentially what they're about. And so with their practices, their agricultural practices came, soil erosion and indiscriminate cutting of trees and bushes and, overall just deteriorating the land, the environment. And the British administration was very interested in breaking, the supremacy of the camel as an economic unit than in actually, protecting the environment, like they say, claim.
And I mean, and to add something to that, because I talk
Yeah.
about, my work is also in wildlife
Mhm.
conservation, and how traditional livelihoods intersects with wildlife conservation policies
Right.
in Africa. And one of the big myths too is that pastoralism is a threat to wildlife conservation because they're
I'm
overgrazing.
gonna go into that.
We're
So
getting
go
to that
ahead, go
later.
ahead. No, go
No, no,
ahead, go
no.
ahead.
I mean, I just wanted to add to that when
Yeah,
you say that they don't destroy their environment, that it's embedded
exactly.
into their folklore, is that
Yeah,
they also do have a relationship with the animal world, right? The wildlife, not just the
exactly.
trees, but the wildlife. And they organize their, how do you say, their grazing
Right.
systems, right, around the season, wildlife, the movements of wildlife too. So I
Mhm.
just wanted to add that because you brought up the questions around how that third myth that
Yeah,
they, that the myths that they destroy the environment or the ecology of place when that
right.
is actually, so it's not just that, they're protecting trees, but they also
Mhm.
do protect in a sense, or are respectful and understand the movement of wildlife, and
Right.
also have embedded practices within their pastoralism to protect wildlife as well. But we'll,
Yeah, because they view the land and the animals as an extension of themselves, right?
right,
Like
absolutely.
that's their worldview.
Absolutely, absolutely, right. And so I mean, I can give you, even with the thinking about the wildebeest, especially the Great Wildebeest Migration in
Yeah.
East Africa is always so contentious because they see pastoral movement as an impediment, or undermining or threatening some of these the wildebeest beast migration, when indeed they are planning their own livestock movement, right? Herding, I mean, livestock movement around that migration. So they don't just randomly, you
Yeah.
know, all year long graze at these particular places, but all their grazing patterns are around the seasonal movements of wildlife.
Yeah, it's done in a very scientific way. Yeah.
Exactly,
It's
absolutely.
organized.
Right. I mean, it's done, it's what they call traditional ecological knowledge, is their knowledge of
Mhm.
local knowledge, right? That has been in a form, is knowing the place, the ecology of place, um
Mhm.
and how they arrange it, right? Like that knowledge that they have gathered from generation to generation.
Yeah.
Absolute empirical knowledge.